My heart didn't flutter because of the weight of my 78 years. It hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird because my own blood had decided my fear was his currency. I was standing over the stove, the gentle whistle of the tea kettle the only music in my quiet kitchen, when the world exploded in a cacophony of air horns and mocking laughter. I felt the heat of the steam graze my cheek as I lurched back, my hand clutching my chest, my breath coming in ragged, shallow gulps. And there he was, Leo, my grandson, with that glowing rectangle of a phone held up like a shield, his face twisted into a grin that didn't reach his eyes.
Got you, Nana. Oh man, that's gonna go viral for sure. Look at your face.
He didn't see the way my knees trembled. He didn't see the flicker of genuine terror that had bridged the gap between a peaceful afternoon and a heart attack. To him, I wasn't the woman who had changed his diapers, or the one who held his hand when he was afraid of the dark. I was content. I was a prop in a digital play that I never auditioned for. He laughed again, rewinding the video, his thumb dancing across the screen to edit the moment my dignity slipped. He didn't even notice that I hadn't said a word. You see, there's a specific kind of silence that settles in a house when the respect has been sucked out of the room. It's heavy, like the air before a summer storm in the valley. I watched him walk away, still chuckling, his shoulders hunched over that glowing screen. He thought he knew me. He thought because I bake peach cobbler and wear lavender-scented lotion, I am a creature of predictable softness. But he forgot who raised his father. He forgot that before I was a nana, I was a woman who lived through winters that could freeze the soul, and a world that didn't have delete buttons for its mistakes. I sat down at the kitchen table, my hands finally stilling. The tea grew cold in the pot. I looked at the shadows stretching across the linoleum floor, and a thought began to take root. A cold, sharp thought. If Leo wanted a show, if he wanted to play with the mechanics of fear, then I would give him an education he wouldn't find on any social media app. I would show him that the shadows in this old house have been here much longer than his internet connection, and they know exactly how to whisper. I've lived in this house for 50 years. I know every floorboard that groans under a footstep, and every window that rattles when the wind hits the north corner just right. Leo had moved in 6 months ago, finding himself after college, which mostly meant finding ways to avoid a job while filming his prank series. He called it granny scares. I called it a betrayal of the sanctuary I had offered him.
You okay, Nana? He called out from the living room, his voice casual, distracted. Don't be mad, it's just a joke.
I'm not mad, Leo, I said, my voice as smooth as polished stone. I was just thinking about your grandfather. He always said that if you invite the devil to dinner, you shouldn't be surprised when he asks for seconds. Whatever that means, Leo muttered. I heard the familiar ping of a notification. He was already uploading it. He was already sharing my vulnerability with thousands of strangers who would laugh at a frightened old woman. I stood up and walked to the pantry. Behind the cans of peaches and the bags of flour, there is a small wooden box. It hasn't been opened since my husband, Silas, passed away. Silas was a man of the woods, a man who understood that nature isn't just sunshine and birdsong, it's also the silence of the predator. He taught me things about the mind, about how easy it is to make a person doubt the very ground they stand on. As I touched the cool wood of the box, I felt a spark of something I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't anger. It was a cold, calculated resolve. If you're enjoying this journey into the darker side of a grandmother's love, please take a moment to subscribe to American Granny Stories. We know that wisdom often comes with a bit of a bite, and there are many more tales to tell. I took the box to my bedroom and locked the door. Inside were items that Leo wouldn't understand. A roll of thin, high-tensile fishing line, a small battery-operated tape recorder from the 90s, a jar of stage makeup I'd used back in my community theater days, pale, sickly gray, and deep, bruised purple. And most importantly, a set of instructions Silas had written for a haunted fundraiser we did for the church back in '84. He was a master of the unseen presence. I began to map it out. Leo's bedroom was at the end of the hall, the furthest point from the stairs. He spent his nights with headphones on, immersed in glowing screens, oblivious to the world around him. He felt safe in his digital bubble. He thought he was the hunter because he had the camera. He didn't realize that a camera only sees what you point it at. It doesn't see what's standing right behind you in the dark. The first step was the subtle shift. That evening, I didn't make dinner. I sat in the dark in the living room, staring at a blank television screen. When Leo came down, hungry and looking for a meal, he stopped at the entrance to the room.
Nana, why are the lights off? I didn't turn my head. I was just listening, Leo. Can't you hear it?
Hear what? He sounded annoyed, but I caught the slight hesitation in his step.
The house, I whispered. It's been agitated today. All that loud noise earlier, the air horn. It woke things up that usually like to stay asleep in the attic. Leo scoffed, but he didn't move closer. That's just old house talk. You're trying to spook me because of the prank. Good try, though. I hope you're right, dear, I said, finally turning to look at him. I had applied just a touch of the gray makeup under my eyes, making them look sunken and tired. But if you hear the scratching, don't go into the hallway without a light. Please. He laughed, but it was a quick, nervous sound. He went to the kitchen and made himself a sandwich, tossing the crusts into the sink. He didn't notice the thin, invisible line I had already strung across the bottom of the basement door, or the way the kitchen clock had been set back 10 minutes while he was in the shower. The night began as it always did. Leo retreated to his room. I heard the thumping bass of his music through the walls. But at 1:15 a.m., or what his clock thought was 1:15 a.m., I began the first movement of my symphony. I went to the hallway and stood perfectly still. I used a long wooden dowel to gently tap on the ceiling joists from the attic access. Tap, tap, tap. Rhythmic, deliberate. Not like an animal, like a finger. The music in Leo's room stopped. I could feel him listening. I waited. 10 seconds, 20. Then I pulled a string that led into his room through the gap in the old floorboards, tugging on the corner of his heavy curtains just enough to make them sway, even though the windows were shut tight. I heard his bed creak. I heard the floorboards groan as he stood up. I slipped back into my room and shut the door silently, watching through the crack. The door to his room opened slowly. The blue light from his phone's flashlight cut through the darkness of the hall. He panned it left and right. There was nothing there, just the quiet, empty hallway and the smell of lavender. "Nana?" he whispered. I didn't answer. I pressed play on the old tape recorder I had hidden in the linen closet earlier. It was a recording of a low, wet, ragged breath, the sound of someone struggling for air, mixed with a faint metallic scraping. Leo froze. I saw his phone light tremble. The boy who had laughed at my terror was now standing in the dark, his breath hitching, his eyes searching for a threat he couldn't see. He was right where I wanted him. But this was only the beginning. The prank he played on me lasted 10 seconds. The lesson I was about to teach him would last a lifetime. Leo stood there for what felt like an eternity, his phone light darting like a trapped moth against the floral wallpaper of the hallway. He didn't know that I was watching him through the decorative zent above my door, a little architectural quirk of these old Victorian-style builds that allows for airflow and, in my case, a perfect vantage point. I saw the sweat glinting on his upper lip. I saw him swallow hard, his Adam's apple bobbing in the blue light. He finally gathered enough courage to shuffle toward the linen closet where the sound had come from. My heart did a little dance, not of fear, but of the thrill of the hunt. I had raked the tape recorder to a simple pressure plate under the floorboard. If he stepped too close, it would cut off abruptly, leaving him in a silence far more terrifying than the noise. Creak. He took the step. The wet, ragged breathing snapped into a dead, heavy silence. Leo let out a small, pathetic whimper. "Nana?" he called out, his voice cracking like a dry twig. "Nana, if this is you, it's not funny. I'm serious." I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I let the silence do the heavy lifting. Silence is a canvas, you see. A frightened mind will paint the most horrific monsters on it if you give it enough time. Leo stood frozen for another minute before practically sprinting back to his room, the door slamming shut so hard the pictures in the hallway rattled. I heard the lock click. I smiled in the dark. 1-0, Leo. The next morning, I was in the kitchen long before the sun peeked over the horizon. I had the smell of bacon and fresh coffee filling the air, the ultimate sensory camouflage. When Leo finally emerged, he looked like he'd been dragged through a briar patch. His eyes were bloodshot, and he kept twitching at every little sound the house made. "Good morning, sunshine," I chirped, flipping a pancake with practice ease. "You look like you didn't sleep a wink. Was it the wind? It was quite gusty last night." Leo slumped into his chair, his hands shaking as he reached for a mug. "It wasn't the wind, Nana. There was something in the hall, a sound, like someone was dying." I paused, the spatula hovering in midair. I turned to him, my expression a mask of grave concern. "Dying? Oh, Leo, you must have been dreaming. This house is old, certainly, but it's a happy house, usually." "It wasn't a dream," he snapped, his bravado trying to make a comeback. "I have it on my phone. I started recording when I heard the scratching." He pulled out his phone, his thumb hovering over the screen. This was the moment I had prepared for. While he was dead to the world in those few hours of fitful sleep he managed to get, I had used a universal remote app to access his phone. I might be a granny, but I'm a granny who knows how to use the internet for more than just knitting patterns. I hadn't deleted his video. That would be too obvious. I had simply replaced the audio track with a very faint, distorted version of his own laugh from the day before. "Listen," he said, pressing play and sliding the phone toward me. The video showed the dark hallway, the shaky beam of his flashlight. But instead of the terrifying breathing, there was only a low, rhythmic sound. It sounded like a mocking heartbeat. Leo's face went pale. That's not what I recorded. I recorded a person, someone breathing." I tilted my head, looking at him with pity. "Leo, honey, it sounds like you're just hearing your own laughter. Maybe your conscience is bothering you about that prank. The mind plays such strange tricks when we feel guilty." He snatched the phone back, staring at it in disbelief. No, I know what I heard." "Maybe you should take a break from those screens, dear," I said gently, placing a plate of eggs in front of him. "They blur the line between what's real and what's content. If you're finding this story as gripping as Leo finds his haunted house, please consider hitting that like button and leaving a comment. Do you think Leo deserves a little more education from his Nana?" Leo didn't eat much. He spent the rest of the morning pacing the living room, checking the corners, looking for wires or speakers. He was smart, I'll give him that, but he was looking for technology. He wasn't looking for the subtle ways a house can be manipulated. He didn't notice that I had moved his car keys from the bowl by the door to the inside of the refrigerator. He didn't notice that the family portrait over the mantel was now tilted exactly 3 degrees to the left. By the afternoon, the psychological erosion was settling in. He tried to film a vlog about the weird vibes in the house, but every time he started talking, I would start humming, a low, discordant tune that Silas used to say could make a dog howl. I did it from the laundry room, the sound traveling through the vents, making it impossible for his microphone to pick up anything but a haunting, buzzing drone. "Nana, can you stop that?" he yelled from the den. "Stop what, dear?" I called back, my voice the picture of innocence. "The humming. It's ruining the audio." "I am not humming, Leo. I'm folding the towels. Maybe it's the pipes. They do moan when the water pressure is high." I walked into the den, a stack of warm towels in my arms. He was sitting on the sofa, surrounded by his gear, tripods, lights, cameras. He looked small. He looked like the boy who used to cry when he lost his favorite teddy bear. For a second, a flicker of guilt touched my heart. But then I remembered the air horn.
I remembered the way he laughed while I gasped for air, clutching my chest. The guilt vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp focus.
"You know," I said, leaning against the doorframe, "your grandfather used to say that some houses have memories, and when someone disrespects the peace of those memories, the house tries to balance the scales. It starts small, a misplaced key, a shadow where there shouldn't be one, but it grows."
Leo laughed, but it was a jagged, ugly sound. "You're trying to gaslight me, Nana. I see what you're doing. It's a revenge thing, right? Because of the air horn? It's actually kind of clever. I should film this too. Granny tries to scare me back." He picked up his camera, pointing at me. "Go ahead, Nana. Give me your best spooky face." I didn't give him a spooky face. I gave him a look of profound, silent sadness. I didn't say a word. I just turned and walked away, leaving him in the middle of his set. But as I walked, I reached into my apron pocket and pressed a small button on a key fob. In the den, every single one of Leo's smart lights, the ones he'd installed to make his videos look professional, began to strobe in a violent, erratic pattern of deep red and cold white. At the same time, the smart speaker he'd left on the coffee table began to blast the sound of 1,000 air horns at maximum volume.
Leo screamed. It wasn't a for-the-camera scream. It was a raw, primal sound of total sensory overload. He scrabbled backward, tripping over his own tripod, sending his expensive camera crashing to the floor. I stood in the kitchen, calmly pouring myself another cup of tea. The noise lasted for exactly 5 seconds before I shut it off.
Silence rushed back into the house, heavier than before.
I waited. I heard the sound of him scrambling to his feet, the sound of his heavy breathing. Then, the sound of the front door being flung open. I watched through the kitchen window as he ran to his car, fumbling for his keys. Keys he wouldn't find in his pocket. Keys that were currently sitting next to a carton of milk in the fridge. He stood by his car, frantic, patting his pockets, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated panic. He looked back at the house, at the quiet, peaceful house with its lace curtains and its flower boxes. I stood at the window, just out of sight, watching the predator become the prey. He didn't come back inside for an hour. He sat on the curb, his head in his hands. He was waiting for the prank to end. He was waiting for me to come out and laugh and say, "Got you." But I didn't. I just kept knitting. When he finally did come back in, he was quiet. He didn't have his phone out. He walked into the kitchen, his shoulders slumped.
"Nana," he whispered. "The lights, the speaker. How?" "I'm sure there's a logical explanation, Leo," I said, not looking up from my needles. "Electronics are so finicky these days. Perhaps a power surge or a hack. You always say how easy it is to get into people's systems." He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw real doubt in his eyes. Not doubt about the house, but doubt about himself. Doubt about his reality. "I can't find my keys," he said, his voice trembling.
"Oh dear. Well, I'm sure they'll turn up. Why don't you go lie down? You look quite pale. I'll make us some nice chamomile tea." He nodded, moving like a ghost towards the stairs. He didn't notice the wet, muddy footprint I had placed on the middle step, a footprint that was much larger than mine and much larger than his, a footprint that looked like it belonged to someone who had been standing in the rain for a very long time. As he reached the footprint, he stopped. He stared at it. I could see the gears turning, the logic failing, the fear taking root in the very marrow of his bones. He didn't look at me. He just stepped over it and practically crawled up the remaining stairs. The sun began to set, casting long, bloody streaks across the living room floor. The real show was about to begin. The segment 1 scares were just the appetizers. Now, I was going to serve the main course. I went to the basement and retrieved the old projector. The projector was an old Bell & Howell, a heavy, metallic beast that smelled of ozone and hot dust when the bulb warmed up.
Silas and I used to watch home movies on it, grainy, flickering memories of a life built on sweat and shared secrets. But tonight, it wasn't going to show a birthday party or a trip to the coast. I had spent hours the week before Leo arrived digitizing an old reel of found footage Silas had made for a local theater production. A series of shadows moving behind frosted glass, silhouettes that looked just human enough to be terrifying, but just distorted enough to be wrong. I set it up in the dining room, positioning the lens so it aimed directly at the thin, white curtains of the French doors that led out to the dark garden. From the outside, anyone looking in would see nothing but a flickering light. But from inside the house, specifically from the top of the stairs where Leo would have to look down, it would look like a tall, thin figure was pacing back and forth just on the other side of the glass, trying to find a way in. I waited until the house was swallowed by the deep, ink-black belly of midnight. The only sound was the rhythmic tock, tock, tock of the grandfather clock in the foyer. I knew Leo was awake. I could hear the floorboards in his room groaning as he paced, a frantic, trapped animal pacing. He was waiting for the next glitch. He was waiting for the house to bite again. I pressed the remote. The projector whirred to life with a low, mechanical hum that was masked by the ambient noise of the refrigerator. On the curtains, the shadow appeared. It was 7 feet tall, its limbs elongated and jerking in the way only old film can capture, a stuttering, unnatural movement.
Then I did the one thing I knew would break his hold on reality. I picked up the house phone and dialed the landline number. The phone in the kitchen began to ring. Bring, 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 bring. In the silence of the night, it sounded like a fire alarm. I heard Leo's door fly open. He didn't want to come down, but the ringing was incessant, demanding. He needed to know who was calling at 2 a.m. "Nana?" he hissed from the top of the landing. "Nana, the phone is ringing." I didn't answer. I stayed tucked away in the shadows of the pantry, my heart racing with a cold, sharp adrenaline. Leo descended the stairs, one agonizing step at a time. His phone light was off. Perhaps he realized now that a light only makes you a target. He reached the bottom of the stairs and turned toward the kitchen. That's when he saw it. He froze. Through the French doors, the flickering shadow man was walking past, its long fingers grazing the glass with a sound I had synced up via a Bluetooth speaker hidden in the flower pot, the sound of dry nails scratching on a chalkboard. Leo's breath came out in a ragged sob. He didn't go for the phone. He didn't go for the light switch. He collapsed against the wall, his eyes fixed on the moving shadow. "It's not real," he whispered to himself, a mantra of the desperate. "It's not real. It's just the house."
But then the shadow stopped. It turned its head toward the glass, looking right at where Leo was cowering. I paused the film. The figure remained frozen on the curtain, a dark, motionless specter staring into my home. This is the point in the story where people usually ask, "Nana, aren't you going too far?" But let me ask you this. When Leo filmed me clutching my chest, wondering if my heart was about to fail, did he think about too far? When he laughed at the idea of my death becoming a viral sensation, was he worried about my reality? Respect is a two-way street, but sometimes you have to pave it with a little bit of terror to make it stick. If you agree, or if you think I finally lost my marbles, let me know in the comments. We're building something special here at American Granny Stories, and every one of you is part of the family. I watched Leo from the darkness. He was reaching for his phone, his habit of capturing the moment, overriding his fear for a split second. But his hands were shaking so violently he dropped it. The phone skittered across the linoleum, the screen lighting up. It was a notification from his YouTube channel. New comment. "Wow, look at her face. She looks like she's seeing a ghost. Hilarious." Leo stared at the screen. The irony must have hit him like a physical blow. He looked up at the shadow on the curtain, then back at the phone, then toward my bedroom door. "Nana," he screamed, his voice breaking. "Nana, help." I waited. I counted to 5. Then I stepped out of the pantry, making sure to look sleepy and confused. I rubbed my eyes, the gray makeup making me look like a woman who had seen too many winters. "Leo, what is it, honey? Why are you shouting?" He scrambled toward me, literally falling at my feet, clutching my nightgown like a toddler. "There, look at the door. There's something outside." I looked at the French doors. I stayed perfectly still. Then, with a casual flick of my wrist, I hit the off button on the remote in my pocket.
The projector died. The shadow vanished instantly. The garden was just a dark, empty space behind the glass. "There's nothing there, Leo," I said softly, patting his head. "You're seeing things. It's the exhaustion." "No, it was right there. It was huge, and it was looking at me." I walked over to the French doors and opened them. The cold night air rushed in, smelling of pine and damp earth. I stepped out onto the porch, leaving Leo in the kitchen. "See?" I called back. "Just the trees and the wind. Maybe a deer caught in the light." Leo crawled to the doorway, peering out. He looked defeated. He looked like his world had been unmade. I think I'm losing my mind, Nana." "Maybe you just need some real perspective, Leo," I said, turning back to him, the moonlight casting long, sharp shadows across my face. "You spend so much time looking through a lens that you've forgotten how to see. You think fear is a toy. You think people's lives are just backgrounds for your play. But the world, the real world, it has a way of reminding you that you're not the director." He looked up at me, and for the first time, he didn't see a granny. He saw a woman who knew things he couldn't even imagine. He saw the strength beneath the lavender and the lace. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I know you are, dear, but sorry doesn't fix a heart that's been startled. Only time and respect can do that." I led him back upstairs and tucked him in, just like I used to. I took his phone. "To help you sleep," I said, and he didn't even fight me. He was too tired, too broken. I went back downstairs and began to clean up my equipment. The projector, the speakers, the lines. I moved with the efficiency of a ghost. By the time the sun started to gray the horizon, the house was perfectly normal again. No footprints, no shadows, no strange noises. But I wasn't done. The finale was still to come. You see, Leo had a live stream scheduled for the next morning, a big reveal of his latest prank. I sat down at his computer. I might be 78, but Silas was a radio engineer in the Big War, and he taught me that a signal is just a story looking for a way out. I knew exactly how to change the narrative. The morning light was thin and pale, filtering through the lace curtains like a tired witness. Upstairs, Leo was still dead to the world, a deep, heavy sleep, brought on by the kind of emotional exhaustion that leaves a person hollow. I sat in his ergonomic gaming chair, a ridiculous contraption that felt like a cockpit, and looked at the 3 monitors glowing in the dim room. On the center screen was his video editing software. There it was, that Granny Scares footage. I watched myself on the screen, the frame frozen at the exact moment the air horn had blasted. My mouth was open in a silent gasp, my hand clawing at my apron. It was a portrait of a woman in genuine distress. And below it, the folder labeled VFX Assets was filled with laughing emojis and gotcha graphics he planned to overlay. My fingers, gnarled but steady, moved across the keyboard. I didn't delete his work. Oh no, that would be a mercy. Instead, I opened the file I had prepared. I had spent the last few hours of the night recording a very different kind of reaction video. I set his big reveal live stream to trigger at 10 a.m., just when his followers, those thousands of strangers who lived for a laugh at someone else's expense, would be tuning in. But I didn't use his footage. I replaced the source file with a montage of the last 24 hours in this house. I included the footage from my own hidden security cameras, the one Silas had installed years ago for safety, which Leo never bothered to ask about. The stream would show Leo whimpering in the hallway. It would show him sobbing at the feet of a helpless old lady. It would show the prankster being unmade by the very shadows he thought he controlled. But I added one final touch, a direct address. At 9:55 a.m., I heard him stirring. He came downstairs, moving slowly, looking over his shoulder at every creak. He looked older somehow. The arrogance had been drained out of him, replaced by a wary, wide-eyed vigilance. "Morning, Nana," he muttered, heading straight for the coffee. He didn't even look at his phone. That was progress.
"Good morning, Leo. Did you sleep better?" "No," he said flatly. I think I'm going to head back to the city today. I don't think I'm cut out for a country life after all. This house, it's too much." "I think that's a wise choice, dear," I said, sipping my tea. "Some places don't like being used for content. They prefer to be homes." He checked his watch. "Oh man, my live stream, I forgot.
I have to go live in 2 minutes. It's the big one, the scared granny reveal. He grabbed his laptop, his muscle memory taking over. He still didn't get it. Even after the shadows, even after the fear, the lure of the like was still pulling at him. He sat at the kitchen table and hit the start stream button. "Hey guys, we are live," he said, his voice instantly shifting into that high-energy, artificial influencer tone. It was a jarring transformation. "Today is the day. I've got the footage that's going to blow your minds. Nana is right here. She's a total sport, but man, did I get her good." He clicked the button to play the video. But instead of the air horn, the screen showed the dark hallway from last night. It showed Leo, crying, calling for his Nana. It showed him dropping his phone in terror.
The chat window on the side of the screen began to move so fast it was a blur of text. Is this a joke? Wait, is he crying? LMAO, look at his face. He's the one who's scared. Who's pranking who right now? Leo's face went from professional excitement to confused horror. Wait, that's not... What is this? Then the video cut to me. I was sitting in my armchair, looking directly into the camera. I wasn't the scared granny anymore. I looked like a queen on a throne. "Hello, everyone," my recorded voice said, calm and steady. "I'm Leo's grandmother. Leo wanted to show you a scare, but I think it's important to remember that fear isn't a game, it's a teacher. And today, Leo learned that the people you think are weak are often the ones who know exactly where the shadows are hidden. Treat your elders with respect, children, because we were here long before your cameras, and we'll be here long after your batteries die." The video ended with a slow fade to black and the words, "American Granny Stories, always watching." Leo sat in stunned silence. His big reveal had turned into a public dismantling of his entire persona. His phone started buzzing, notifications, calls, messages. His brand was crumbling in real time. He looked up at me, his eyes wet, not with fear this time, but with a profound, stinging shame. "You did that," he whispered. "No, Leo," I said, setting my teacup down with a soft clink. "You did that. You invited the world into my home to laugh at me. I just showed them the truth of who was actually in the house." He closed his laptop. He didn't say anything for a long time. The pinging of his phone continued, a frantic heartbeat of digital rejection, but he didn't reach for it. He just sat there, looking at the grain of the wood on the table. "I'm sorry, Nana," he said, and this time it didn't sound like a plea. It sounded like an apology. "I know, Leo, and I forgive you. But I want you to remember this feeling. The next time you think about taking someone's dignity for a few likes, remember the shadow on the curtain. Remember how it felt to be the one who was small. If you've stuck with us through this journey, you know that a grandmother's love is a powerful thing, but a grandmother's lesson is even more powerful. Don't forget to subscribe to American Granny Stories for more tales of wisdom, wit, and the occasional ghost in the machine." Leo spent the rest of the day packing his things. He was quiet, respectful, and he even helped me move the heavy cast-iron pots to the high shelf, something he'd ignored for months. Before he left, he stood on the porch, looking back at the house. Is there actually something in the attic, Nana?" he asked, his voice low. I smiled, a small, secret thing. "I suppose that depends on how you behave from now on, doesn't it?" He laughed, a genuine, tired laugh, and hugged me. For the first time since he arrived, he wasn't looking for a camera angle. He was just a grandson saying goodbye to his grandmother. As his car pulled out of the driveway, I walked back inside. The house felt peaceful again. The shadows had retreated to their corners, satisfied. I went to the pantry, took out the wooden box, and placed it back behind the flour and the peaches. But I didn't lock it this time. You never know when you might need to teach another lesson. The moral of the story, my dears, is simple. Never mistake a person's kindness for weakness. And never, ever play with a woman who has had 78 years to learn where all the skeletons are buried. Good night, sleep tight, and mind the shadows.